Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm going to 55. I'm the photographer taking photos for the real estate. Yeah, thanks. Hello. All right, so one of the first things I like to do when I get to the property is I like to check out the entire house and make sure all the lights are on, because you want to basically get an understanding of how the layout is and how you're going to take the photos. So let's do a walk around right now. So we're going to turn on every light in here. Foyer, stairs. Here. And if it's staged, make sure you turn on all the lamps too. They usually always work. They don't usually just put them there without the bulbs. Another thing I bring with me normally are indoor shoes. It's good to have a pair in your car because a lot of times these listings are cleaned and staged and you don't want to dirty it up with your outdoor shoes. So what I do is I double check everything and make sure that everything is on, because sometimes you may overlook a light or a minor detail that you don't notice until after you finish editing. But in this case, I made sure I double checked that all my blinds are up, all the lights are on, all the light bulbs are working, all the toilet seats are down. Now we are finally ready to bring out the camera and start shooting. Okay, some of the equipment that I use, and this is what I bring to every photo shoot. I have your standard tripod. You have a manual camera. The one I use is a Sony a7 III. You get a nice wide angle lens, right? So what I'm using is a Sigma 14x24. You got a trigger for your flash, and the flash that I use is a Godox AD200 Pro. It's quite powerful, quite reliable, and it's got great battery life. So it usually lasts me for numerous shoots, and I don't have to worry about constantly charging this. I do bring extra batteries for my trigger just in case I run out. Sometimes it sits in the bag. And what I suggest, what I recommend is to, when you put your equipment away, to take the batteries out, especially out of the flash. Because the flash, you can see the power button here, is it's right here. So it's just a switch. So like, that's on. Sometimes when it's in the bag, it gets bumped around and the switch comes on. And your flash is on the entire time, it drains the battery, and by the time you get to the shoot, you're like, you got nothing left. You don't want that happening. So just to be safe, I just pop the battery out and I leave the battery separate in another compartment. I do that with the same thing with the trigger here, because it's just a button, it's just a switch here, right? And it can get pushed while it's sitting in the bag. So if you want to take the batteries out, I don't usually take the batteries out of this because I carry extra batteries with me. But if you're not bringing extra batteries, make sure this doesn't run out of power. I also carry an extra battery with me for the camera. And another thing before you start shooting, if you want to make sure that the tripod is nice and level, right? That way it saves you work in post correcting it afterwards. So one thing you want to make sure you do is to get a checklist of all the things you need to take a photo of, right? Because the last thing you want to do, and it's happened to me before, is you finish editing, you deliver your pictures to your agent, and they come back and say, hey, where's the washer and dryer? Where's the laundry room? So make sure you get all that stuff ahead of time so that you don't forget anything. There are some agents that prefer you to use the widest angle lens you can get, like even down to like 8mm, because they want to make their properties or their listings look as wide and as big as possible. Whereas there are a lot of other agents who want a more accurate perspective of the property, because they don't want to draw in other realtors or potential buyers into the property based on the photo. And then when they get there, they're like, wow, this place is so small compared to the photos, right? So the agents that I usually work with, they want something around 14, 15 mil. I think that's a good natural perspective. It doesn't make it look too big, it doesn't make it look too small. right? That way, when potential buyers come in, they're not disappointed and you're not wasting anybody's time. The main point of this video is to talk about the potential issues that you come across as a real estate photographer when you get on site. A lot of things that you don't account for, you don't really know until you actually get to the properties. Depending on the agent that you're working with, you kind of know once you start working with them and developing a relationship with them over time, how organized they are, right? So the ones that are very organized, when you get to the property, they're usually already cleaned and staged and everything is ready to go. Just go in there, you basically turn on the lights and make sure that you get all the shots that you're required to get. If you're working with new agents or you're working with them for the first time, you may not know how they are, how organized they are, and you may come across more issues when you get there. Things like, like on new builds, a lot of times the agents are rushed because they want to get the listing out. And they actually don't even have time to go by the listing to check out the place before you get there. And they assume that it's ready, but then when you get there, you'll see that there's construction material piled up in a certain corner, or it's a mess because it hasn't been cleaned and the cleaners haven't showed up yet. Things like that. It's just timing and organization that a lot of them may oversee or forget. But in terms of other issues that you may encounter are weather related, right? If you tell them that you're going tomorrow and you see that it's kind of cloudy, but you're not really sure if it's going to be sunny or not, and then you get there the next day and it's raining. You don't want to be shooting in the rain. You can't get the drone up in the rain. And that's the other thing with drones. When you're flying drones, you just got to make sure ahead of time before you go that the area that you're flying in is not in restricted airspace, right? Because you got to make sure, you don't want to promise an agent or a client that you're going to be getting drone footage, and then when you get there, you're like, it's right next to an airport or, a correction facility where you're not allowed to fly, right? So make sure you check all that stuff ahead of time before you go. And another thing that I always make sure of is your equipment, right? You want to make sure you pack everything, all your batteries are charged, you got memory cards, and always bring an extra set or extra memory card because you never know. Sometimes they do get corrupted. And it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So make sure that you have them on hand because sometimes your listings are not 20, 30 minutes away. It could be further. It could be an hour and a half out. And you don't want to forget anything and then have to drive back and go back. Same goes with flash batteries, triggers. Make sure you got your tripod. Make sure you get the tripod plate, the mount. That happens a lot if you have multiple cameras and you've finished a shoot on a previous day. You forget to take that tripod plate out, assuming that your tripod is in the car and you're ready to go. You get to the location, you get ready to shoot, and you got no tripod plate, the mounting plate. That hasn't happened to me personally, but I've heard of other photographers that it's happened to, and it's not fun. You got to go again. You got to drive back. And sometimes, if you're doing video and you're doing content where you get people there that are waiting for you, and you forget equipment, that doesn't look very professional, right? So you got to make sure that you check and double check everything. And if you tend to be forgetful, what I suggest is to make a checklist and have that. And then before every shoot, before you get in the car, you make sure that everything's checked off, everything's ready to go. I can't stress that enough because you don't want to show up and look very amateurish, even though you know your stuff, right? But as human beings, you do make mistakes, and you just want to make sure you reduce those chances of forgetting something by having a checklist. So for my experience of working with different realtors, it's their main source. Like your photos are going to be their main source of marketing. So that's what's going to bring the potential buyers in. And that is what is going to allow them to do what they do best, and that is to sell the property. So, they got to make sure that the photos that you take are clear, they're bright, and they show a good perspective of the room. Because you want to make sure that you get the entire room, because you want to make sure that it's highlighting some of the main or the best selling features of the property. You don't want to be missing out on certain things, especially if it's got a nice kitchen. You got to make sure that or it's got a lot of storage or a lot of pantry cabinet space. You want to make sure that that's all covered in the shot. And if you have a good view in either a house, like a window, or a condominium, you got to make sure that you get a shot of the view, right? Because that is one of the selling features. And if you're not sure, if you're not clear, make sure you call. There's no shame in calling and asking the agent, hey, listen, I'm at a property. This is what I think, but I want to know what is important to you. You got to make sure you ask the right questions so that you get the shots and the content that will help the agent sell the property. You make sure you ask them all the questions to be clear, right? You don't want to assume and then get back, deliver a product that is not up to par for what they were expecting. So make sure you ask, especially if they're a new client, because you never worked with them before and you don't want to leave everything down, you don't want to leave it down to assumption. I want to talk a little bit about equipment, because equipment, you don't need the latest and fanciest cameras. You don't need something that's 50 megapixels for real estate photography, because most of the time they're just shooting for MLS or social media. Anything over 20 is going to be more than adequate. And you just got to make sure that the lighting is good. You want to make sure your photos are nice and bright, because you want to showcase that the property that they're listing is nice and bright. Nobody wants to see dark, gloomy pictures, especially when you're selling a property. There's a few different techniques when taking real estate photos. You can do HDR, or you can do Flambion with the flash. HDR is when you use bracketing and you're doing different exposures and you're just combining it in the final product or the final photo. And Flambion is when you use a flash. You get the ambient lighting and the flash photography, and then you combine the two photos. Personally, I prefer to use Flambion. I just find that the pictures are, especially when it's not staged, when a property is not staged, or there's less colors in the room, I find that HDR tends to get a little bit more washed out sometimes. Whereas with a flash, you get better colors. Another thing that I find with HDR, sometimes it can look a little fake, whereas the Flambion looks more realistic. But again, it's subjective to the people that you're working with and what they prefer. Another potential issue that you may encounter is that, when you're working with a client, an agent, time is money. For everybody, time is money. When you're editing photos, you want to make sure that you get your process down so that it's nice and efficient, so that you can save time, because you can squeeze in more clients if you can get that process down quicker. Same with a realtor. Their days are busy. They have to tend to numerous different clients and family life and other things, right? Other priorities. So they're always in a rush, because between the time of talking to the client and deciding that they want to sell their property, getting it cleaned, getting it staged, and then getting it listed, it's a very short time period. So usually by the time you go and take the photos, they want it pretty much yesterday. So expect turnaround time to be quick. You don't have much time. You can't say, hey, can I deliver them in a week? It's not like wedding photography where you have time to really edit and fine tune everything. You want to make sure your process is down and very efficient, because know that the clock is on. As soon as you finish taking the photos, they're going to probably be on you. Hey, when can you get them to me? Because I need to get this thing listed and I need those photos. Real estate photography was not something that I wanted. It wasn't my intention of going into at the beginning, but it is very stable income if you find the right clients to work with. And if you build enough of a clientele where you get constant jobs, right? You get a lot of jobs with real estate. It's not like a wedding photographer where you get one client and they're not going to be calling you again for hopefully never again, right? But with real estate, you get a good agent, you could get up to 5-6 listings in a month. And if you can do the math, if you get 10 clients and they're all good agents and they constantly give you work, it gives you a pretty consistent income stream. I know there's a lot of content on YouTube in regards to the technical aspect of real estate photography and the settings, but there wasn't a lot on issues that arise when you get out on site or before you go. So hopefully if you're new to this or you're looking to get into real estate photography, hopefully I covered some of these things that make you better prepared before you go out. And if you found any value in this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.